interesting. I mean, you get a good proc for a big hit, and it's one of your harder hitting spells. I think if the numbers are just off now, I mean, we don't want Grand Crusade to be worse than Reckoning, for example. And that's an easy thing to tweak the numbers on once we see a little more how things stabilize with the Inquisition damage and that sort of thing. It's a valid point.
Thank you very much.
Hi. I kind of have another / paladin. It's kind of a two-step question about paladins and priests. And it actually involves about the holy class of spells. Paladins I consider them to be a magic caster because they operate on the mechanic of mana. Every other caster class has 2 schools of spells they can use. Warlocks have Shadow and Fire. Priests have Holy and Shadow. Paladins, Holy only. And there's really nothing in the game except maybe an alchemy potion that can resist Holy. So why is that? Because they kind of seem to have that steamroller effect. It's like, hey, I'm Holy. You can't resist it. Sorry, I'm Holy. Sorry.
Over time, we've changed a lot of the Retribution Paladin abilities from being holy to being physical for exactly that reason you're talking about, because it tended to be a little too powerful. But the whole concept of a paladin is they're all about holy. I can't really think of any other school you could give them that would make sense. I mean, it's their concept. Did you want to add something?
Well, I was going to say, what I was thinking, I guess, ideally-wise, is the only... I mean, because, yeah, they're holy. The only thing I was thinking about is maybe having, like, a cleansing fire. Because, I don't know, it just seems kind of weird that there are no holy-based enemies. That they, like I said, they can just steamroll through everything. Everything else can say, oh, this is a fire elemental, I have to cast Shadow, or I have to cast something else. They can just... they've got the... one button.
They're a little more complex than one button now. So.
Well, sorry, I mean...
The guys behind you in line are going to get after us for that one.
Well, I don't want to take it up, but... Thank you.
It's just as an additional quick follow-up, it's also worth noting that I think the advantage of Holy over other spell schools isn't quite as large as it used to be in the past. We don't generally make resistance-oriented gear anymore, and so if you're facing a paladin, the difference between someone who deals holy damage and someone who deals fire damage is maybe your Mark of the Wild or Blessing of Kings, will mitigate 10% of the fire damage and not the holy damage. But that's not the reason why you're losing to the paladin if you are.
It seems like some classes have to take PvP talents, or what could be considered PvP talents, in order to reach the 31 point. Was this intentional? If it was, why?
Could you give an example of what you consider a PvP talent?
Shamans. They have I honestly can't recall it off the top of my head, but they have the talent for taking less magic damage.
Sure, but isn't that useful in PvE? I mean, essentially, if you're not tanking, most of the damage that you're taking, whether you're in a 5-player dungeon or a 10, 25-player raid, is going to be magic damage. And so essentially, it's the difference between life and death in some cases. It's the difference between your healer needing to spend more mana or less mana. I think some of what we've done with the talent tree redesigns in general for Cataclysm has been to free up talent points to allow players to take what we see as utility talents. Obviously, if you're given the choice between a pure damage or a throughput talent and something that improves your survivability or is of more situational use, you're always going to take the pure throughput talent, right? It's less damage taken versus you heal for 10% more, less damage taken versus you nuke for 10% more. That's not really a choice. That's kind of a false choice. So what we've done in many cases is to give you many of the passives that you previously would have taken just for speccing into the tree, and now you have the freedom to choose among some of the utility situational talents.
But as a caster, some of those cases you really shouldn't be getting hit anyway. There are the area effects that are constantly going on, but in some cases, there's really no reason for you to be getting hit unless you stand in fire, which is, dumb.
In an ideal world, none of these things would be needed, right? In an ideal world, something like combat res wouldn't be a useful ability because no one should ever die. In reality, people die.
Hey, so first of all, I want to say I was here last year, and I asked you guys when you're going to fix Vanish, and now it's fixed, so thank you.
You're welcome.
So I do have a different question for this year. Wanted to ask about specifically rogue offhand weapons. With the removal of weapon specialization, we can now use any offhand we choose, dagger, sword, axe, whatever. But because of the speed difference between a dagger and any other offhand, dagger is really the only choice for top damage. Is there any plans to make a speed parity between, say, an axe and a dagger or a sword and a dagger so that a rogue can really choose, whatever offhand weapon they want to use?
So that's one of the things that we're looking at pretty closely. Like, it feels sort of odd to see a rogue running around without a dagger to a certain extent. But at the same time, we also want you to have sort of variation and choice in your weapons. Right now, the offhand weapons, it's pretty much, we're the only guys who want fast weapons, so we put the fast daggers out there so that you guys can pick those up. That said, if we're doing like specialized weapon sets, stuff like that, we might consider other fast offhands to play with, or in the future, just changing the rogue mechanics so that you don't necessarily care quite so much about that fast offhand.
Thank you.
Hey guys, how you doing? I'm Krieg from Iron Up on Bleeding Hollow, and I wanted to initially say that despite all the flack that you may get from the community sometimes, I think we all appreciate the hard work that you put in to balancing it. My question specifically is about warriors. Rage normalization has been a really contentious issue throughout the entire Cataclysm beta, and with that you've had inner rage. You recently changed that from a passive to a usable ability, and I was curious, what have your numbers said through the past weeks? Is that going to stay? Do you have more changes to come, or what's the outlook for it?
I missed the ability you said changed from a passive to an active.
Inner rage.
Oh, right. Yeah, so I mean, we came up with the inner rage early on before we had completely normalized the rage to the extent we did, trying to solve the problem of the warrior that gets, more rage than you can possibly spend. A lot of warriors think that it may not be something they need. Interestingly enough, it looks like it might be a pretty cool decision for the protection warrior to decide when to turn inner rage on or off. If we get to the point where you just don't need it and we find that it's kind of a dead ability, then we'll do something else with it. But we want to make sure that's the case. We haven't seen a ton of raiding yet, or battlegrounds or really high-end stuff. Once we see players with crap loads of haste, it may change a little bit.
Thank you. Strong feeling we need it for now as a possible escape valve for I have too much rage, I can't spend it all. And once we're sure that won't happen anymore, then maybe we change it.
Thank you.
Hey guys, I have a question about the level 85 Warlock ability, Demon Soul. Right now, it just feels like a trinket. I mean, a lot of the design which you guys are coming out with now is you're getting away from very passive, flat percentage damage increases and things like that. And that's what the ability seems like. I know there's not a lot of people at 85. We haven't really tried it out yet, but it seems like it's not really towards your design goal of having a fun, ability. So I was just wondering, why you felt that Warlocks needed an ability like that, and what the design intent of the ability would be.
I think a lot of the design intent for a lot of the new abilities, all the 3 new abilities, is try to have something that we didn't want to give a class another Frostbolt ability, basically, something you're using all the time. We want to make more niche kind of. This is rare situations where I'd use this ability because players already have a lot of keybinds that they already have, So with that ability, the design intent of it was Warlocks really don't have very much a burst, kind of I'm going to power up arcane power, and that was the design intent of it. I think the balance between the different the imp version versus the Fell Hunter and stuff might not be the numbers might not be there yet, but that would be the design intent of that ability. And it's very difficult to design abilities for some of the classes we have now because what do you give Warlock? They pretty much almost have everything these days. Same with the Warrior. So that would be the answer.
Okay. Thank you.
Alright, I play evac on Lightbringer. I'm a rogue. I wanted to see, what are you guys doing with combat? Where's the future of that going? Because the damage right now is really, really low in live and on beta. Mutilate is way ahead. On an unrelated note, I wanted to thank you for the change you made from Hunger to Blood to Vendetta. That was amazing. But combat's extremely low. I mean, I'm sure you guys have seen the meters. Premonition put out some tests on the beta, 85 and 80. Combat's just really low. Mutilate's tearing it apart. And Subtlety was viable the first week of 4.0, think you guys noticed a bug to Honor Among Thieves again, and he fixed that real quickly. So, where's combat?